Welcome back. So to discuss some of the issues raised in that report, which you've seen, we'll have Senator Ayo Arishe, who is a former chairman, Senate Committee on Privatization, joining us from Abuja. And then we'll have Mr. Ivie Richards, who is the Executive Director, Corruption Observatory, also joining us online. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. Let me start with you, Senator Arishe, because...
Good morning.
Yeah, looking at...
Morning, Chairman.
Good morning. From what people saw in that report, and perhaps what they might have read, because at the moment now, the latest perspective which we see that some of the members, they say they are aggrieved members, are raising concerns about this probe, saying that the chairman is going beyond the mandate. So in terms of the approach, how this is being carried out, for those who think that, look, from what they've seen, they may not get any meaningful end to this. Senator, do they have a point?
Well, this is a very tough scenario. On the one side, we need money to develop our infrastructure. On the other side, the National Assembly has responsibility to ensure that we do not enter into negotiations that would actually put this country in the so-called Chinese debt trap. And so it's a good thing that this is coming into the open, but I would imagine that even if nothing is directly achieved in terms of rewriting whatever agreement we had in the past, the National Assembly will use this opportunity to ensure that terms are defined for international loans, and that we are not, there is no agreement that would actually jeopardize the future of this country and our sovereignty in terms of actually our assets. And of course, because there are so many examples all around the world, particularly in the African continent and Asia, that leaves a lot of, gives concern, to people of those countries. And the examples carried from Kenya, Djibouti, Sri Lanka, even Malaysia, that the new president has said, no, we got to slow down some of these loans, because if proper planning is not put into it, 30 or 20 years might seem a long time, but it will soon be here. And if there is no plan that is adequately put in place to ensure that these funds are payable, and particularly when you look at the rail lines, it should be...
Yeah, but Senator, before we get into that part, I needed to just find out from, because, you've been in the Senate, and having seen the way that probe is going, the perspective of some of those members, one wonders, they didn't seem to have unity of purpose, as it were.
Well, there might be some digression, but I think they should be focused on what is necessary, and they focus on what are the terms of this loan. And the Nigerians or any executive arm of government, particularly the executives usually in charge of stuff like this with the approval of the National Assembly, should avoid signing any secret document, because this is our country, and it's a commonwealth. So any money, any loan that will be taken, there must be transparency, that is very clear, that people know what these terms are. Because even if we are no longer there tomorrow in terms of meeting these obligations, Nigeria will still have to meet the obligation. So I think they should be focused on why this probe and what would Nigeria benefit, and of course lay this out, and it will be incontrovertible whether this is in the national interest or not, which I think a probe of this nature or an inquiry of this nature is in the best interest of this country, particularly if we did not follow any procurement procedure act, and there are no competitive biddings for either the
just hang on a minute.
The projects.
We'll get to that part as well. My apologies. We'll get to that, but let me ask Mr. Richards. Now, the why of, the why question about how this probe is turning out. But for those who think the how the probe is being carried out may eventually, overshadow why the probe is going on from what you've seen. Do you share the same view?
Quite frankly, I think that, and I hope very, very strongly, that this Committee on Treaties is allowed to properly do its work. Very clearly, if you watch what's going on, you will see a clear indictment on the leadership of the National Assembly and the executive. Why have I said this? The way the Committee on Treaties and Agreement is going on, you would want to think that the loan was completely taken without the knowledge of the green and red chambers. So what I see that is playing out is the fact that the process for obtaining international loan was breached. It's possible that the executive just sat down with the House Committee on Finance and then quickly wrapped up these issues in both the green and the red chamber, and agreements was signed. But you would want to agree with me that taking international loan should be much more deeper than that. In fact, you would need the House Intelligence Committee, you would need the Committee on Finance, you would need the Committee on Judiciary, you will need the Federal Ministry of Justice, you will need the Federal Ministry of Finance, you will need, and why would you need all of this? To ensure that the loan, which the executive may have pronounced viable and sustainable, is not only seen to be so, but proven to be so. Now, a loan will be viable if it can repay itself, and all that plan will be laid out. But a loan can also be viable and not sustainable. A loan will be seen to be sustainable if the risks involved are, if the opportunities are much more than the risks. And all of that, you would be able to cool out from the conditions attached to that loan. So if you look at the conditions attached to the loan may be viable, but a wise country may say, look, the loan is viable, but thank you, no thanks. We are not interested in taking this loan. And that is why committees on intelligence, House Committee on Intelligence, Committee on Finance, even procurement, and all of these committees are expected to be part and parcel of, to be part of the agreement before a final agreement is taken by the country.
Let me take this to Senator Arishe. From what you have heard Senator Richard say, and the questions that have been raised at the panel over time, it would seem like there are some gaps. At present, or maybe if you can give us a guide, what is the normal process of getting this loan? Because we know that before the federal government, the executive eventually gets the loan, you go to the National Assembly for approval. At what point does that happen? Does the National Assembly get the details before or not? Because it would seem like that's missing.
Typically, the negotiations are done by the executive. They are supposed to follow procedures in the Financial Regulatory Act and all that. And they're supposed to follow the Procurement Act. And they're supposed to have negotiations, particularly if you want to build a project. For example, take for example our airports. There should be competitive bidding. And part of the bidding process would throw out, if you are going to bid for us, I will pay you over a long period of time, or you just want to get paid, or you want to use your country's Exim Bank, and you look at the rates and all that. Now, at the end of the day, whoever says, I'm giving you this money at this low, not a commercial interest rate, at this low interest rate, these are the conditions that I want. When they look at that negotiation, they will now send it to the National Assembly for approval that we have negotiated XY loan to execute 1, 2, 3, 4 projects. And the National Assembly would actually send that to the appropriate committee for deliberation. After that, the loan is usually passed, because if you look at it that this is for the interest of the country, in terms of our infrastructural decay, everybody is yearning for us to move beyond where we are now. We look at our transportation system, and I think that has been a major focus. But that should not take the shine away from due process.
Just one moment, Senator.
Procedures.
Just one moment, Senator.
Followed. So,
yes. Concerning those procedures that you talked about, a number of people are wondering. You said the executive takes it to the National Assembly and they do a little bit of scrutiny, and then they send it for approval and all of that. But the question that's been asked over time is the details of the loans or of these agreements do not get to the National Assembly before the passage, and which is why some of the revelations that are coming out now from this inquiry by the House of Representatives is a little shocking. Shouldn't the National Assembly also get the details before approving the loans for the executive to get it?
In a full democratic setting, and for some loans, that should be the norm. But I think most of these Chinese loans, as we have studied from country to country, they are shrouded in secrecy. And they convince the people that, okay, hey, look at the position of the minister on this item. It appears like, yes, we're like beggars, we have no choice. We must take, whatever is thrown at us in terms of some of these soft loans to say. And because the issue of secrecy normally surrounds most of the loans from the experience of other countries, from China. So if we are going to take their loan, some of these conditions will be thrown at us. And they, on the basis of that, would actually probably look at the deliberation. These are the conditions. Maybe there will be an MOU before the actual loan agreement, stating that, okay, this cannot be disclosed. So in many situations, you find out that when government changes hands, they now begin to see some of the lacunas and lapses in the agreement signed, But that's why I said it is still the prerogative of the National Assembly to say, look, these are the kind of international loans we can take. And that will be the law. And if you want to take an international loan, the National Assembly, at least the relevant committees, must know the details of what we're going into, because they represent the people. So as a result, we look at it that, okay, this is the past. How do we move forward from this situation? Because we had not made a law that has made it illegal for us to sign any secret document for a loan, for an international loan. I think it's about time we get to that, because many people are just learning some of this. They don't even know what exactly is this sovereign, the fact that we have to give up our on some items, on some properties, or some maybe land or whatever. You must say you are waiving your immunity, on some of these loans. And that has been the pattern almost in all the cases that I've gone through. You sign that, then the Chinese will give you money. But major area of concern, which we're even not looking at, is the fact that what is the arrangement for technology transfer? I just listened to the minister now saying that he has 500 and something Chinese working, whereas we have maybe some thousands of Nigerians, maybe 20,000. But what is the salary of those Chinese, and what compared to the 20,000 that we have hired in the country? So some of these are defined areas that we have to look at and define what we need. Because I've had to have some transactions with some Chinese people. When they brought the number of people they are bringing in into the country, the kind of salary, and the salary they are proposing for Nigerians, I just said, hey, I just can't deal with it. Because some of this, it takes experience to understand that, look, these people are here for their interest. It's not so much that they love Nigeria so much so, but we do require money. If we are not able to get it from IMF, from the World Bank, or from US Exim, or European Exim, or German Exim, then we look at the best that we can get in terms of negotiation from the Chinese. But I look at it.
Speaking about negotiations,
people don't know.
Okay,
and we're not aware.
Let me bring it to take it to Mr. Richards concerning whether people know or what they know or don't know. Now, we understand that the committee they've invited finance, justice ministries to come in and shed some light on some of these things. Now, the first, hopefully, are you of the opinion that perhaps when the Minister of Justice speaks about the sovereignty clause, when he sheds light on that, then that may suffice? And then the concerns raised by the minister that this loan is in jeopardy, the works, because the impression is given is that the lender is of the opinion that the country is together on that request. And if they see that we're not together, we're divided about that request, they might just pull the plugs because it may not go well for them. What do you think about that?
Chamberlain, I listened to the senator speaking from Abuja, and the points he had raised concerning the secrecy of some of these loans that come from China. I saw a figure of $500 billion going to Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, going to Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy, going to Police Affairs. And you were talking about secrecy. Public information is for public consumption, except if it is classified. And I do not see any reason why a loan agreement or a clause in a loan agreement should be a classified information. That's one. Now, if there is a process in place for this country to obtain an international loan, and that process is breached, automatically that process is corrupt. Corruption is the slightest deviation from the agreed norm with an ulterior motive. So for the minister to begin to say, we have other loans in the pipeline, do not let us scrutinize this properly, let's take all the loans before we scrutinize it, I completely disagree with him. And why do I disagree? I was here in Lagos about 1986 when Babangida signed the SAP, took the SAP loan. Now, Nigerians were given the opportunity to scrutinize the conditions attached to that loan. We told the president at the time, not the military president, not to sign that agreement. And behind the door, behind that, the back door, that loan was taken and heaped on Nigerians. Let me remind you, Chamberlain, that this Lagos, Okokomaiko became popular because Nigeria were producing Volks, Santana, and Kombi bus from there. We were producing Pojo from Kaduna. In fact, I bought Pojo about that time for 6,000 naira. We were producing steer in Bauchi. There was this fertilizer company at One. The Leyland coming from Anamco. The moment that part of the condition of that loan was that the naira must be devalued. and then internal controls broken down. Control like price control board and all those things, all internal controls concerning the economy should be broken down. The loan was taken, and lo and behold, less than 12 months, most of these companies started, and why did it happen like that? We didn't have the foreign exchange to even get spare parts for replacement and all of that. And the economy became comatose. Now we saw Nigerians wearing second-hand clothes. Nigeria became a dumping ground for used cars from Europe. Today, Nigeria is becoming a dumping ground even for used cars from China. Why would a minister with brain in his core say that we should not scrutinize conditions attached to a loan because other loans are coming? His children will not pay for that loan. This loan is heaped on future generations of this country. And I am I am very, very disappointed that at this level of our development, we could still have an administration, a National Assembly that will step aside from laid down procedures in obtaining loan and then go into secret modes and begin to sign corruption upon the head of Nigerians. This is totally unacceptable. And I congratulate the Committee on Treaty and Agreements. And I think that this issue must be properly and exhaustively scrutinized, and possibly a renegotiation of these terms be carried out to ensure that Nigeria is on a safe footing.
All right, Senator, one wonders, still talking about the process of obtaining these loans, because it's supposed to, if the National Assembly, from what they're saying, are not aware of all of these details before the processes went on, they wonder, look, is it the ruling party, both at the center and the majority in the National Assembly? Is this an indictment on the National Assembly for not having all of these details before now, in terms of their capacity to function as required by law?
Well, let's say we say our democracy is actually a work in progress. Being the ruling party and being in control of the National Assembly, there is this bias that once there's an executive bill and is from the head of the party, and that is executive, let's say the president, sends in an executive bill that we're obtaining a loan of XYZ. We want to revamp the Edo-Kaduna rail line. We want to build airports. We want to renovate our airports because the standards are, below what is acceptable in the international community, including the equipment. And they make a case for it. Now, usually, the problem we have right now in this country is the problem of trust. People don't trust government officials, and with reasons. And so because of that, you find out that because of the party affiliation, when a bill comes to the National Assembly, and everybody wants to show that, okay, this government has done something. These are things that we require without any question. And no one would expect that the request coming from the executive has not actually followed, because there are already acts. There's a Procurement Act. There is, if you are borrowing international money, it must come to the National Assembly. That's a given. And so if any arm fails to perform the functions, but once the request comes, it's taken for granted that everything has been looked into. And all that will be discussed is that, okay, we have this request from the executive arm. The government wants to take this money to do this, to do that, build a dam, do all, So the details of the contract will no longer be the issue that the National Assembly will be looking at that point. And we are not saying that this is right or wrong, but of course, expressions like this, what is coming from the Committee on Treaty and international loans is a welcome development, no doubt. And that's why we're having the discussion.
All right,
so
Senator.
what do we gain or what do we
just
benefit
a minute
after this discussion?
Okay, yeah. we'll let you conclude your thoughts when we return in just a moment. Please stay with us. Well, Senator, could you, in addition to what you were about to say before we went to break, for those who wonder, saying, look, no matter what the conclusions of this House Committee on Treaties, Agreements and Protocol come up with, chances are high that the government may not listen to that and go ahead with accepting these loans.
Well, let me say that by itself, taking loans to develop our infrastructure is a fact that we cannot run away from. Because if we continue to take loans and we do not have the infrastructure to support our population in terms of quality transportation system, healthcare system, and several, even our educational system. And we do not make enough money, we don't generate enough revenue that will enable us build such infrastructure by ourselves. It becomes imperative that we need help somehow. And loan by itself is not bad. It's the conditionalities attached to this kind of loans that people are saying, why? And of course, when you look at the conditionalities, it includes even the technology transfer. For you to have Chinese people to be maintaining refurbished or renewed train coaches and all that, I don't think it's the best for our economy. There are so many things that we need to put in the public arena for debate.
Senator, just one moment. There was something you just said now that kind of, in a way, corroborates what Mr. Ivie Richards said earlier before we went on the break. He was saying that, perhaps we need to renegotiate some of the conditions of this loan. And that seems to be something that you are also talking about. First of all, you want to confirm that you are saying that? And even if we are, is that possible now, and how?
Well, let me tell you that in Malaysia, they had this kind of loans. The new president came in and said, look, we're not able to continue with this kind of arrangement, because he was talking of building a brand new city for them. And because his people cannot even afford to live in such homes, he says that will bring influx of immigrants. So he had several reasons to say we have to renegotiate this. And of course, because some of the terms were not clear, and there have been people that have said, no, we're not going to continue with this loan. We need a renegotiation because this was fraught with some corruption. Because if it's shrouded in secrecy, you now say, okay, some things were not actually put in place. So a government can say, yes, we want to renegotiate, and with just cause. If the National Assembly says, this particular loan, we do not like the terms stated in there, and that is the voice of the country. We'll now say, okay, the ones that you have taken, and Nigeria has agreed to those terms, we now need to find out how do we pay these monies back. Would they be paid through the service being provided, particularly the rail lines or the airports? And are we channeling part of this revenue on a daily basis towards liquidating those loans in the future? If we are waiting for 20 years to start paying, then we're already in problem. Because so when you look at some of this, it is not impossible to renegotiate. I don't have the full content of the agreement, but I think from what we're saying, particularly the fact that these assets are tied, or some other assets are tied to these loans, in which case we cannot walk our way out of it unless there is proven corruption attached to it. And of course, it doesn't necessarily have to be corruption alone. If the due process was not followed and there is a breach of our laws, then we can go back and say, no, we are no longer going to follow up or with this loan because of 1, 2, 3, 4. So, but again, we must have alternatives, because these are things required for our growth, for our development, for us to move forward. So it's a choice between the rock and the hard place. There is really, I don't see the winning strategy if all we are producing, our monocultural economy, still persists. And of course, we heard about several rice mills in this part of the loans. So if those rice mills are generating and we're able to start exporting, whatever money we are making from there, something should be set aside towards paying these loans. If it is left just for the government to pay back,
just one moment,
we have
Senator.
not diversified this economy sufficiently. It will be a problem, yes.
Okay. Now, let me take this back to Mr. Richards. Now, there was an element of this whole conversation that you mentioned the other time, which is the corruption element. And when the way you said it was like, no, it's not about money, it's about process. How do we begin to realign all of that, given that on the one hand, some of these conditions have been there, and on the other hand, China loans are not the only ones we are taking. There are other multilateral organizations and countries that we get these loans from. Are you looking at a situation where we scrutinize all of these, or is just these China loans that are the concern?
Well, I saw from the statement from the Committee on Treaty and Agreements that we have a total of about 500 international loan agreements. And that of the Chinese loan, I think, is just a fraction of this 500. Now, laying a background for the issue of corruption, as I said earlier, when you talk about the theft of money and kleptocracy and all those things are actually manifestations of corruption. Corruption is systemic. I'm saying it because if we have a system in place, agreed, and is resident in our laws on how we should obtain international loan, a slighted deviation from that agreed system amounts to corruption. And what the Committee on Treaties and Agreement is doing right now has thrown the spotlight on the fact that the system has been breached, which means that corruption is at play. Now, that is enough basis, enough ground to call for the renegotiation of the loans from China. Number two, if you lay down the loan conditionalities from China alongside with those from other parts of the world, you should be able to, and me and you, we are not privy to this, but members of the National Assembly should be privy to this. You should be able to look at side A and look at side B and look at what is missing in side A and what is missing in side B. From that, clear judgment can be reached to say that, look, we will need to renegotiate this loan. One thing I know, and it's a personal opinion, where Asian businesses grow, the economies suffer. You can go to the Republic of the DRC, Congo, you can just look around. And recently, an African nation is already groaning over the loans obtained from China. So those days, we refused to listen to the voice of coming from Tanzania. Nyerere was crying. Tanzania was almost becoming a failed state because of the conditionalities of IMF loan. We didn't look at that. We went ahead, neck deep, we went into the SAP thing that came from IMF. I'm telling you, I don't know how old you are, but your children will still suffer from those conditions. Let me just point this. Babangida now is resting in his house. Olufalaye was Minister of Finance. is resting. Ndika Kalu Ndika was CBN governor, is resting. But Nigerians are suffering. Before that loan was taken, our currency was, I'm not so sure now, but about 30 or something naira to $1. But overnight, that thing went to about 85 naira to $1. I did a project, a research work in 1994. I went to the Federal Ministry of Finance, went around CBN offices around this country. I did not see one single paper, a document where that devaluation was carried out. Yet it was real, and that's exactly what happened. So,
all right, Mr. Richard.
So be very careful.
All right, then. But I think Mr. Kalu, he was first Commissioner for Finance, then Minister of Finance in the state. So, but we do appreciate your thoughts this morning, and we also do know that the concerns for those Chinese countries and in Africa, they usually, it's either the ports, the airports, seaports, or media. Those are the infrastructure that usually are of interest to some of them. But we thank you, gentlemen, Mr. Ivie Richards, Executive Director, Corruption Observatory, and Senator Ayo Arishe, former Chairman, Senate Committee on Privatization. Thank you both for talking to us today.
Thank you very much, Kimberly.